Hi, everyone. My name is Bob Glazer. I'm the founder and CEO of global performance marketing firm Acceleration Partners. Going to be your moderator today. We have a great panel that's going to provide a lot of insight on where the industry is now and where it's going. And we have some questions we're going to start with. We've got the Slido app. If you have it, it's going to be a democracy. The questions are going to pop up that have the most votes. And then we also have, towards the end, our throwable or kickable mic if you have a question as well. So definitely get us your questions. If we don't cover them, we'll start off, get the discussion going, and then see where it takes us. And I'm going to have everyone introduce themselves since they will do a much better job than I am. So start with the gentleman to my left.
My name is Todd Crawford. I'm a co-founder and vice president of strategic initiatives at Impact. We're a SaaS-based MarTech company. We have 4 different marketing solutions, one being Radius, which is our partner marketing platform.
And I'm Julie Van Ullen, and so happy to be here today. This is actually my first ever Affiliate Summit West, so thrilled to be here with all of you. I'm the GM of Rakuten Marketing, and those of you who are unfamiliar with what we do, we have a legacy affiliate network, but have, over the course of the past few years, via acquisitions and building of new technology, have become a really data-centric organization to facilitate multi-channel advertising and work both with publishers and advertisers to find efficiencies in their spend.
Hello, everyone. My name is Mark Walters. I am the CEO of Awin Global. For those of you who don't know anything about Awin, shame on you. Hopefully we can address that. We have been on a little bit of an acquisition spree over prior years. I think going back to the UK, where Affiliate Window, as it was originally called, acquired Buyout, its biggest competitor. We then moved through acquiring ShareASale, an amazing high reputation network domestically for the US, and more recently, Affiliate, and then a strategic partnership with Commission Factory in Australia and APAC.
Thank you. Pleasure to be here. I am the president, Waleed Al Atraqchi, the president of CJ, and so we're the arguably maybe tied for the largest network provider in the U.S., doing a lot globally, increasing our investments in tech. So thanks for being here.
All right, we'll have to dig into that some more. The audience wants disagreement, not agreement, after Singapore. All right, so let's start off with, in mature markets such as the US and Europe, we see a lot of brands looking to expand their partner types beyond coupon and loyalty. They're not looking to shrink those, but they want to grow other partnerships, around that. So what is your strategy to help clients in the US who kind of advance those efforts and help diversify and bring new people into the space? And Waleed, why don't we start with you?
So in terms of just in general on the recruitment side, recruitment's vital to the success of affiliate. If you look at a program over 5 years, 40% of the growth comes from bringing in new publishers or partners each year. So it's vital. In terms of expanding beyond the types you just described, I think there's several opportunities. There's some stuff in the tech side that's interesting. Brand-to-brand partnerships are interesting. Affinity groups are also an opportunity. I'd say probably the biggest opportunity macro to the industry in total is on the content side. And on the content side, I'd say there's 2 that are, again, probably most interesting, hottest, long-term. One would be what's happening with the media companies. So, traditionally they treated affiliate in a more passive way. Are you seeing a big change there? There's a huge opportunity to drive revenue, to drive profitability. And if you think about the number of eyeballs, you think about the number of properties, I think that's going to be a huge sector long-term. The other area is influencers. So, the way younger people, because I'm getting older, consume a form of media is very different today. And it's the people they know and trust in terms of understanding, making decisions, whether that's on the commerce side, whether it's on the political side. that population obviously will continue to grow and become more important on the commerce side. So I think those are the two. Broadly in terms of what we do, we've been focused on content probably now for about the last 4 years in terms of recruiting content players into the network, in terms of onboarding, in terms of education, providing the right kinds of tools that are more unique to content players. And then I think the other big one is the math, right? The math sets you free. So in every business I've ever been in, businesses can only get so big based on intuition. It's the empirical evidence that allows a business to grow. And so understanding the customer journey and the empirics behind that, I think will unleash content, and that's the kind of stuff that we're doing.
Great. We have 3 mics for 4 guests, so we'll see, we have a little Hunger Game in terms of getting a spotlight. Mark.
So I'm going to try to not just reiterate the same stuff that everybody here is going to say. Partners form many different buckets, and I think whether you're looking at it from a domestic point of view or global, the opportunity is very much out there, and everybody wants to work with as many as possible. But in order to kind of initiate some of that engagement, I'm going to focus on new tech provider solutions. I think this is a really important kind of area for us. It's something that we look to innovate and build ourselves. But at the same point, what about those many hundreds of thousands, if not millions, of entrepreneurs who are building something that is exciting, that they want to be able to kind of reach out for those partnerships? We have that scale, we have that reach. We need to make that opportunity, but we need to make it easier. And so from our network perspective, we have the advertiser master tag, where we basically identify, we vet, we check for ethical position, we check for things like GDPR compliance, we look at proof of concept. Some of them come with a proven track record, others come as pure startups. And what we do is we basically put them through a process where those advertisers can get live just by flicking a button. And on that basis, we can actually give them that scale and that reach to grow, generate the revenue which is essential in order to kind of sustain that forward momentum. And a classic partner, I think, that we actually have here in the crowd, RevLifter, is a classic example of that in the sense that it adds such significant value to our partners that what we're actually able to do is roll it out at scale.
I just saw Simon slip you $20 before you came up on stage, so I don't know if that was related at all.
Sorry, if that was $20, I'm going to take that back. Forget RevLifter.
Julie.
Yeah, so it's a great question, and for many, many years now, we've been cultivating publisher partnerships with content publishers, with bloggers, well before we had a thing called influencers, right? Which is now obviously a big focus of ours as well. So I agree. I think that one of the biggest facets is the robust publisher development team that you're putting in place to bring in new opportunities. And one of the core areas where we're actually expanding beyond the more traditional affiliate publishers, where we're seeing really interesting success, which actually links a lot to my background working with more traditional media publishers, or in this case what we might call a non-endemic publisher like a BuzzFeed or a CNN or a Condé, who don't really have traditional affiliate programs in place, whether it be content-based or paid placements or interesting ways that you may even be able to use the display ad unit functionality for CPA gains and create a tide that lifts all boats in a marketplace where media companies are looking for good quality revenue in new areas. So that's another facet of our publisher development team where we're seeing a lot of success. But I think I would be really remiss in also saying that in a question like that, I think there's certainly majority of intelligent brands and advertisers are not limiting in any way the types of publishers that they work with, whether they're loyalty, coupon, or content. But there are some who question, right? You question the incrementality sometimes of a coupon publisher, let's say, which is a big point of education for us, because the answer is really in the data, that you can't ignore any piece of the funnel, and there are important kind of propensity signals that live within the users if we can work together and share data to understand what they are and use those types of publishers and potentially even create heightened incentives for those types of publishers for certain audience segments, if you will.
Because we're a MarTech company, we don't provide affiliate managed services. We either partner with agencies or the clients decide they want to in-house. So what we try to do is make our technology either empower the brand to discover and recruit and activate what I call non-traditional or even traditional partners, as well as give them the tools so that they can bring those partners on into an interface that is simple for someone who doesn't understand affiliate marketing. There's a lot of companies out there that are now willing to work with large brands, but for them to log into what most affiliates are used to using, it's overwhelming the tools. So they need something very simple. They don't need to navigate. They want something clean and branded to the advertiser that they want to partner with. So we've worked really hard to kind of reword and repackage that experience. And then we, in September, acquired Media Rails, which is a solution that the whole industry can use, and it helps a brand target and identify potential partners or influencers, determine who they are, and then create more of an automated email drip campaigns that will get them to sign up, get activated, and then also kind of ongoing manage them. So that's really been our approach, is just making it easier for these partnerships to work. I mean, it's the biggest single type of partnership that our advertisers are seeing growing their channel outside of the kind of usual suspects. So we've just really been listening to them and working with them to make it easy. Also, if YouTube wants to partner with Ticketmaster, they're not partnering with Impact. They're not joining our network. They're partnering directly with the brand in their terms and their contracts. So it makes it a lot easier, a lot less friction, where we don't really have to be involved in that onboarding.
Great. Well, so not the people in these chairs, but I think maybe the companies that would sit here in the US market have historically not collaborated very well. I think in the US, the industry, and it's probably endemic to the culture here, has a little bit been every man and woman for themselves. But right now the PMA is actually working, I think for the first time, across all the networks and platforms to build a true industry market study that everyone can take to clients and sort of advocate for more budget, which is something we've really been missing in the marketplace. So the question really is, how important is collaboration to the industry's awareness and getting budget, and do we really need to kind of change the discussion and dialogue to grow the pie rather than necessarily winning business from each other? I'll throw that out to whoever wants to.
Yeah, I'll start. I'm one of the board members of the PMA, and I'm actually on that committee. And it's something that the UK did with the help of the IAB. So we've been working very closely with some of the people there that have gone through kind of the learning curve there to try to get it right as soon as possible. It's asking a lot to try to, basically what we're trying to do is size the US performance marketing industry, right? So that gets CMOs and CEOs sitting up in their chairs when you can produce that kind of neutral data, not one company produced, right? This is more of an industry contribution. So we've been working with third parties like Pricewaterhouse and to be the people that take that data and have NDAs to keep it anonymous and then aggregate it and create kind of this market size, which I think is just going to shift more dollars and more attention. I mean, you're seeing it as the affiliate channel just diversifies as more interesting partnerships are being managed, biz dev partnerships and media partnerships outside of the usual affiliates. It's getting more interesting for brands and it's getting up into the executive team. So this can only help as far as I'm concerned. I'm excited about it. We're kicking it off as we speak.
Okay.
Awesome. Well, I love trade associations. I worked at one for 11 years at the IAB, and I can't say enough wonderful things around what they can do to help uplift an entire industry. And truly, they are the rising tide that lifts all of our boats. And I think the last real, market sizing study or market study was the one that Rakuten did with Forrester back in 2016, which is way too long ago, and it was one that we performed. So I think that this is fabulous, and it's wonderful, and we're thrilled to be a part. But I'd go even further to say that especially as we level up as an industry and start to use data more, start to think about interoperability standards that could help us collectively scale more efficiently. It's a trade association like the PMA that would set those types of standards, that would evolve data protection language within contracts, within standardized T's and C's. And if one day we had truly an affiliate marketing standard, the way we do in display, it makes me sound like a dinosaur, but I was at the IAB when we created 300 by 250. And before that, a display unit had to be created every time. The creative needed to be created every time by an advertiser, and that's crazy. So the scalability that provides really brings a lot of value to all of the partners and advertisers and publishers that inhabit the space. So beyond supportive.
So obviously I'm going to say collaboration is key. I'm glad, Todd, that you mentioned about the UK, because I think we were part of that 8 years ago in basically getting in place all of the requirements to get that collaboration, to make that report something where we could actually sit at that senior digital table that affiliate actually has every right to be at, but still struggles. I mean, I don't know how many of you here actually saw Neil Pratt's keynote session. Fantastic guy, great speaker, loved the presentation, but it didn't, to some degree, paint a picture of the affiliate marketplace that I know and that we all want. And I think this is the bit that kind of brings into the idea of collaboration. Are we actually going to walk at the pace of the slowest walker, or are we going to set standards that we ourselves are going to expect networks, SaaS providers, publishers, advertisers to adhere to? Because at the moment, ultimately, we're all competitors. And when somebody drops the ball, somebody's there to pick up the pieces. But what happens when an advertiser does the same on their side, and a network takes a position not to work with them? How many of those publishers understand that reason? How many networks step in to fill that gap? And how many of those publishers who would have been affected actually then turn a blind eye and move across to that new player? That's, for me, the real aspect of collaboration on what we really want to kind of like deliver for our industry.
I remember the question. I think it's interesting to do kind of a market sizing and some of that stuff. I don't know if that in of itself is somehow compelling, that makes like some kind of industry, creates some kind of industry change. I guess I'm a math guy. I used to be good at math back in the old days, but again, from what I see a channel that the more it's understood empirically, the more that you can understand its performance relative to other channels, the more you can understand incrementality of the channel, the more, and as Todd said, there's many opportunities to build in terms of publishers, but the more you can do it empirically, the more you can put math behind it, the more dollars are going to shift. And so I would see the emphasis being on that type of analysis that would move budgets and investments in a significant way.
Yeah, I would actually just like to add to that I think something like multi-touch attribution that we've been talking about forever, it takes that sort of standard and that collaboration with folks like us in order to bring something really meaningful to market so that it's understood and utilized, and we can really make that change. And then we can leave it to the tech providers to duke it out as to who can build the best tools. But I think it's something that we alone can't accomplish.
Well, I mean, the benefit of this study, it's not going to be a one-time study. So what's great about it is when we do it the second year, right, we can illustrate the growth or the changes, right, by certain, advertiser categories or just the industry as a whole. So I think that's where it really starts to add a lot more value. Showing dollars going somewhere, people to say we should be putting dollars in that direction as well. So that's good. And then as a board member, I at least need to plug the URL. It's thepma.org if you want to find out more and read about what's going on there. We produce a lot of white papers and a lot of good information on the industry. So, and if you're interested in participating, being a member, it's a nonprofit industry advocacy. It's the only one in the U.S. for this industry. So,
did you have it? I want to push this a little bit because it sounds great in theory, and I'll build off something that Mark said because I think you've probably seen this in the UK I think the fact that everyone is in the same place and city in the UK also forces people to work together a little differently, but the platforms and networks have worked together around these standards to enforce them. So I'll pick on Waleed and Julie in this case as an example where, let's say, I guess there's two cases of, and I think this is something that has gone on in the UK. So you guys determine that there's major fraud with a publisher on your platform. Is your network compliance person going to pick up the phone and call Waleed's network compliance person and say, hey, this is what we're seeing with this publisher. Are you seeing this? Is this a bad actor that we need to take out of our system?
Right. No, I mean, maybe in some cases, but not across the board. And that's a really important part. It's why we should all be on the board or on the various committees and councils of the PMA to be sharing that sort of data. I mean, the IAB had created things like blacklists that would be adhered to for an entire industry for use cases like this that we should absolutely be doing.
But if the people on this stage don't agree to, and historically this has been tried in the US, this is going back into history, that people put up standards and then other people, well, we don't want to, we're not going to, if the biggest players don't agree to them.
A perfect example, this is years ago, I helped found Commission Junction. So when I was working there, a very large publisher violated the agreed upon terms that everybody else in here had agreed to, and we kicked them out for over a year and no other network did anything. So, I think in the UK, this seemed a little more tight-knit, and I think because most of it is centralized in London and people have worked in jobs at networks, at brands, at publishers, there's a lot more cross-pollination. It's almost not a bad thing, but more incestuous, and so people feel more accountable as a whole, where in the US, it's so spread out, and it is kind of this every man or woman for themselves, and they're going to run their business how they want. I'm all for it, but
to some degree, I'll agree with you, Todd. I think yes, kind of UK market is a lot smaller per se, kind of like landmass wise than the US, but still we're talking about competitive businesses, and we're talking about loss of gross profit and the accountability for that.
Right.
And I think to some degree, it's hard as well when you want to stand up and be responsible, because if you have a program managed across two networks and you basically run it clean, you can be demonstrating less performance per se, but more ethical, more incrementality. And how do you then manage to justify that? And we also don't want to kind of like sit there bad-mouthing our competitors, but you want to have that collaboration to say, this is what we've identified. Don't allow this activity to move across because it's not going to work. And this plays into the next step. People will always question, well, why do advertisers go exclusive? They go exclusive because they then control everything they have within that ecosphere.
Well, you brought up an example, or someone did, and so let's say CJ has a client and then they're not paying an advertiser and they're not paying for a year, and you guys get fed up with them, and so you kick them out. But then your sales team goes, oh, they just left them. Like, let's go get them when they've just demonstrated that they've left tons of publishers, holding the bag. Like, this is not an easy question, but yeah, not good for the industry, but good for the sales team. But how do we change those conversations or get people discussing those issues? Because that's a bad player for the industry. And it might be good in the short term, but it's probably not good in the long term for anyone.
It's definitely not good in the long term. And other industries have seen incredible backlash and an overhaul of how inventory sources are looked at and utilized, and we should not let that happen here. So I think we have to all agree and find the right venue to do that, but let's not let that happen here the way it has in display and other categories.
Well, Mark, you started the question, and it's the top one on the board right now, so might as well throw that out to everyone, which is, can each person address their requirements for exclusivity and the reasoning behind it? So did you want to feel like you said your piece there? You want to
I mean,
reiterate that?
The one thing I'm going to say is this is not a one-way street. We don't go out there and demand that our partners are exclusive. It wouldn't get very far if you did, unless you had something to offer. The reality of this is it's driven, and more so now, by the partner themselves, whether they happen to be an advertiser or a publisher. And the reality is that they want control. They want a level of compliance. They want to be a bigger fish in the pond. They want to have an understanding end to end. I mean, from a network perspective, we don't just do affiliate marketing. Obviously, we track multi-channel. We do a lot of other specific parameter-based activity for our partners. They like to have all of that accessible within a Tableau data reporting suite. They want to be able to make real live comparisons on activity. And that's something that, we can facilitate. And that's something that we do. And in order to do that, we have exclusive relationships.
And they may want a deal too, so right?
Yeah, obviously, the point is it doesn't go, it's quid pro quo.
Right.
At the end of the day, if you have an exclusive relationship and you're going to put a significant amount of, let's say, resource behind it, you need to have the longevity within that contract to make sure that it's going to have the return. So generally, contract terms are agreed that they're longer than 18 months, 2 years. And in return, the client doesn't have a gun to their head. They sign it because they want it.
I can't say much more than that, to be honest with you. Mark's right. Advertisers, there was, I'm new to affiliate, but when I came here, there was some less exclusive relationships I noticed, but that has really died because they want accountability with a single provider. They want to have data from a single provider. They want compliance from a single provider. And they want a strategy and tactics that kind of all hold together. And I do think I do think that diluting that, or the other approach, I'm not sure gets you anymore, but I do think it becomes less of a partnership, less of a good relationship. So I'm not seeing advertisers asking for this, lack of exclusivity.
Yeah, I mean, I think that the reality is that we can't do as much for an advertiser if we don't have that level of exclusivity, and especially as Rakuten Marketing, we're really focused on the value of the ad dollar throughout the funnel. And if you're splitting cookie pools, even within the affiliate channel alone, to not be the exclusive partner does not really enable you to put true multi-touch commissioning rules in place so that you can attribute the value to the blog versus the last click. And then you start to expand that to display, to search, to video, to even television. And that's the ultimate goal. That's what I'm personally in it for, right? Is that I think that that's when true industry change comes, is if a partner, and that's the key word, and I know we say that, but it's true. If we are a vendor with a silo approach, we can't really use data to find more efficiencies and to help advertisers understand their consumers more, and then translate that to the publisher side, whether that's an affiliate publisher, display, or otherwise. It's really important to our future.
Guessing you have a different answer.
So I think you should earn exclusivity. So if Impact has better data and better attribution and better deduplication, and you want to have a program on 2 different solutions, ours and someone else's, it's not very long where you realize there are problems and you will consolidate. And therefore we earned your exclusivity. We don't demand exclusivity. We don't prevent our clients from going to other vendors. And there's kind of two forms of exclusivity in this industry. We're going to be the only affiliate provider, and so whatever that means, it's not clearly defined, but if you work with someone else and we think they're our competitor, we can call you out on it. The other is what's called non-circumvent. And that means if Bob comes to me as a brand and I say, hey, you should work with Rakuten, they have a partner called Ebates, and I think they're really good. And he says, this is great, let me sign up with them. And then he wants to go and actually work with Rakuten and move Ebates over. My non-circumvent says, because I created that partnership, you can't move. I'm exerting ownership over affiliate relationships. And to me, I think in the beginning of the industry, the networks incubated. Nobody knew what an affiliate was. They didn't know who affiliates were. So you went to a network because they had a pool that you could learn from. Today, every brand has 10, 20, 30 partners that drive 95% of the volume. They're shared across everyone. There's no exclusive partnerships. And if somebody wants to move, they're going to move. And I don't think that these let's put it another way. If I go by Salesforce, there's nothing in that contract that says I cannot use another CRM tool. If I go by Marketo, there's nothing in that contract that says I can't use another. So I don't see anywhere in the MarTech or the online marketing industry where exclusivity is even something people think of. And what I'll tell you nobody up here, including me, would do is tell a brand, I'll be exclusive to you. I won't work with your competitors, right? So there's no publisher that feels owned by a network or a platform. And so for me to tell a partner, you can't work with this advertiser that used to work with us but is moving, it's absurd. And these are in contracts today with people on this stage, and they will sue you over it. And most companies, most C-level executives don't want to be sued for breach of contract. And I wholly disagree with this. I don't think it benefits anyone. You talk about pricing concessions, that's market conditions. If I have to lower my prices to win your business, I may ask for a longer contract, but that doesn't mean I'm demanding that you're exclusive to me or that you have non-circumvent. That's not how it works. It's not how it should work. I don't think there's anybody in this audience, you can raise your hand, if you think exclusivity and non-circumvent is something that you want in any marketing contract that you sign. I just don't see a place for it, especially when you're willing to sue your clients.
I saw Mark go for the mic, so I'm sure we have some rebuttals.
Yeah, I just want to kind of answer to that one because, again, if the people here wouldn't sign a contract, then why would an advertiser? Where's the gun that's being put to their head that's basically saying, you need to agree to this clause? Or if you have dedicated partners, those dedicated partners can't move from whomever or wherever. I think the one thing I want to kind of understand here is that the network doesn't necessarily control, this contract setup or anything else. This is something that's put together in a bipartisan way. And for whatever reason, those advertisers, those publishers, they've either had experiences previously or they want to have experiences in the future. And they're willing to give some form of commitment for that. And I think it's too much of a whitewash to basically paint a particular picture. And I'm not even going to touch on the fact that, from your point of view, when you're making a significant, play in a market, naturally you would want it so that everything was available, so that you could kind of have access to it, that the people could switch and it's freedom of choice and everything else. But the reality is that for whatever reasons, either historically, current, or future, there are obviously going to be, abrasion points to that. And that isn't necessarily down to a network per se. We've never taken any advertiser legal regarding any contract clause.
Yeah, and I would add too that Rakuten Marketing has never sued an advertiser to get out of a contract. If we haven't performed to their goals, then we haven't earned that business. And we'd be happy to let them go elsewhere. It just so happens that doesn't happen very readily, which we're thrilled about. But I think the thing that we need to remember, and would love to hear your thoughts on, is that from our perspective as a multi-channel network, and the state that the industry is in today, having intelligent analysts and people who can help an advertiser understand how their dollars are working for them across channels is a complicated endeavor. We have slews of data science teams and analysts who work on this stuff to help marketers do that day in and day out, and that is a challenging, if not impossible, endeavor if you don't have access to that data firsthand. So I would love to hear your thoughts on that.
So let's think about telco, mobile, right? When it started, you had to sign a contract and you were stuck, and even porting numbers didn't exist for a while. Today, nobody demands a contract, and you can port your number and move to a different, I just got off AT&T onto T-Mobile. You can sell me on your services and your technology, and you can deliver them to me, and at some point, I can be dissatisfied with them, yet I can't leave because of the way the contract's structured. That's not earning exclusivity. So, you know, it sounds good up front, and that we're putting all these resources into your program, but if I can't make you happy, if what you need I don't have to run your channel, why should I be in the position to dictate how you make money and sell on the web? So to me, I'm more of a free market person. When we started CJ, we never had exclusivity. We bought a website called whenwillitend.com. Everybody could go there and put in a date when Linkshare and BeFree would stop demanding exclusivity. Nobody ever won anything. So I've been in this industry for 20 years. Everything I think about and do is to grow the industry, because I know if I grow the industry, if I benefit the industry as a whole, it'll benefit whatever I'm doing, whatever company I've started, whatever I'm trying to do. And I think that if you provide great service and great technology, you'll be able to retain that business. If your pricing isn't right, and you're not willing to negotiate, or you're not keeping up with other companies on a tech front, and these companies realize they need this and they can't move, and I hear it every day. I hear it every day. There are people selfishly that want to use Impact and they can't because of the contract structures that they have with some of the people on this panel. And I don't understand how that benefits the brand. So
I'm not going to turn this into a kind of me and Todd kind of thing, because I don't know who you're actually talking about or anything else. But I'm only reacting to the things that you've kind of said. And I would agree in most cases, and I do understand this idea of building a relationship where it's trust, and when you deliver that value, it's appreciated and you get that retention. But we're not talking about all things being equal here. What we're talking about is the work that's been required to craft and build a progressive affiliate program, and then price comes into the mix. And you have a new player who will do it for less. And from an EBIT point of view, when you have a long-term business, that is a prerequisite. If you are just going to focus potentially on top line, then that focus shifts and it's more a land grab. And then the situation changes, because these advertisers can be offered an illusion of the same, because publishers will just move across. But will that growth, that longevity, that recruitment, and everything else be continued? What they get is they get an immediate win of you get to pay a lower price. But at what price?
But if you're not getting the results, that's the thing. It's easy to promise. If you leave my network, leave that network for my network, because I promise you it's going to be better. We have case studies. We take business from them all the time, and we double their revenue. There's very seldom anything in the contract that if they don't fulfill on that, there's penalties. And I mean, it does get structured in there, but very rarely, not if you don't ask as a brand. And the bottom line is whatever you've promised, whatever I'm expecting, if my boss comes to me and says, this isn't good enough, we need to take it to the next level, and I do a deep dive, I look at other vendors, and I decide for my business I need to move to another vendor, and then I pull out the contract and I go, we can't. And I've seen it where it's an auto renew. One day after auto renew, they go, shit, we didn't want to auto renew. Too bad. All day long.
I know we could get into this for a while. Let me spin this. I'll make it equally probably as controversial, but in a different direction. So let's talk about pricing, because I'll tell you one thing that we have seen very honestly as an agency is, and that's very different from our philosophy, we have seen clients, and sometimes it's the duration of the agreement, it could have been one of these auto renews, paying, and it drives a lot of frustration, paying very different amounts for the exact same service. Because they signed it here or someone got a bad deal. So you have, if you think about this in like a Salesforce world, it would be if you found out that this guy bought 1,000 licenses and it cost him $99 a month and this guy bought 1,000 licenses, it's a tough thing for the marketplace when they feel like, hey, it's just, the pricing is just when you signed it or how it is. So I'd love to hear, maybe take this different, like pricing methodology. Like, do we believe that people who are getting the same thing should be charged the same price, or is it, what the deal you struck or how it is? Because we've seen this be a point of frustration with merchants in the industry when they find out that company A is being charged half the price for the same thing that they have, and often it makes them want to switch, whether it's from you to you or you to you or otherwise.
Yeah, I'll take a stab at that at first. I think when you have a company that's been operating for a long time, it can turn out that you have some variability in that pricing, right? But it's our responsibility to not only look at that with frequency and make sure that we adjust in areas where it doesn't make sense one way or another, but to also stay competitive with the industry. But I think when price is considered, especially since I spent a great many years of my career in display and in programmatic. The death knell of that industry was the race to the bottom in terms of price, right? Because it created an environment where publishers were encouraged to let fraud through the door just to make their nut. And advertisers suffered dramatically to the point where we had to put really intense controls in place, both technically and contractually. And I think it's really important to remember that here, that we should always remember, and we can take this back to exclusivity too, but the partner that you choose is, you should be supporting that value that they bring you, and they should be honest about what that needs to be based on the service level or tier that you need, whether that be SaaS all the way up till full service.
All right, so our number one question was before, can we move on from this question? So maybe we should.
What were we talking about?
So we'll talk about product grab. I do want to represent the publishers in the room. So I bring up another issue that we're seeing a lot these days, and really understand how you guys view it, because I think publishers are looking for that answer, and that's late payments. So I know, and there's different ways of doing this. I think the SaaS platforms have taken a different stance. They're not the in-between, but people are paying much later than the stated things that the merchants are putting up there. And then publishers want to know, like, what's the enforcement or what's the recourse? And then I think, what's the network's obligation to either make good on that or let publishers know that if someone hasn't paid for 6 months. So I'd love to hear, like, philosophically how you approach that. And from the network standpoint, do you believe that if a publisher doesn't pay, is that your responsibility to step in, or is that part of the assumed risk in the model?
So from our point of view, it's a compromise. In essence, a handful of years ago, we took out credit insurance, and we basically felt that we had to make sure that our publisher partners, were paid for the sales that they drove. And they needed to be paid quickly. So the reason for taking out the credit insurance was, irrespective of payment terms, we set up a traffic light system, and we would identify the credit limit that we would have for each advertiser, and as long as they fell within that threshold, we would pay them when those sales were validated on the next payment run, without question. Now, the only thing about that is our shareholders said to us, well, hold on a minute, we're not a bank. And I said, well, maybe we should be. And that's where we sit. Almost 40 million we put forward as working capital to allow our partners to be paid as fast as possible. Now, of course, credit risk is exactly that. It has a risk element attached to it. The reason we had the traffic light system was we want to be able to identify those clients who are outside of that credit allowance. But to some degree, let's be honest, it's because of seasonality, certain advertisers just explode. And so we've got to be able to kind of override and put a human element within that. But the real reason we had the traffic light system wasn't just so publishers could choose who they promoted in accordance with how quickly they get paid, but it was also working as a visible measure for any advertiser in a segment to see what your competitors were doing. That visibility was the biggest trigger that allowed us to say, if you just reduce your 60-day payment terms to 30 days, you will now be on green status and your publishers will be paid equally as fast. And then we create that level playing field where people can make a choice that isn't driven by reward. They've already generated the sale. It's crazy that they have to wait for that payment.
Waleed.
I don't have a lot to say because this is, in a way, this is news to me. So I should go check if we're not doing what we're supposed to do. So I haven't heard from publishers that there's some problem. But we pay monthly on a regular basis. We create transparency on what has been paid, what hasn't been paid, what's going to be paid. There's a bunch of things that we do from notifications, forecasting. If somebody, we will deactivate an account if it's not paying. We will pursue that advertiser for payment. We offer credit terms to some advertisers. So we treat it very seriously. But I personally haven't heard of some kind of growing problem there.
Just to ask you a question. So on that basis, if it doesn't turn to bad debt, if they're just late payers, does that have an effect on when the publisher would receive their commission?
Yeah, it does get delayed, I think. Don't hold me to it because this is going further down below my pay grade. So
no, I get it, but I think this is where we, for example, as a panel, the idea is we could leverage both individually, but also in a united fashion in putting a standard in place to come full circle back to that idea of collaborative compliance on what would be considered a valid payment term that we all agree to that publishers can then get paid without having to absorb any further risk.
I think you're going to have to charge advertisers a lot more. When you think of when the industry started, brands were paying 25, 30% of spend. I'll extend credit risk on that. That's like a credit card, right? It's built in to manage debt. Margins have come way down. Some brands are getting single-digit % of spend deals. They're very large. There's no way that anybody should be assuming credit debt for that. I think the bottom line is that there's transparency. It shames the advertiser. They hear from their publishers. On our platform, advertisers get really worried the first time it happens. I think the big disconnect is with the finance departments. They get given an invoice by the marketing team and they process it on their own terms. But with our contracting tool, they can shift the payment and locking, and we encourage them to line that up with what their financial team can process. That's really, I think, what has to happen. But we're not taking credit risk.
Yeah, I completely agree. This is an industry issue, right? And really what it comes down to is returns. And there needs to be a period of time if we don't want to be contending with clawbacks and that sort of disaster that we give for those returns to occur. And that's what we do at Rakuten Marketing. And then because we have such large teams going after collections, when we receive that payment from the merchant, we return that around within 1 to 2 days. Are there other things that we do in terms of vetting merchants that we feel more comfortable shouldering that risk with? Yes. Is that a direction that we'll continue to go? Largely, yes. But I think that this is definitely an industry issue, which you allude to, that that we'll have to find kind of collective understanding about.
We process out payments every day, so we don't have a once a month payment schedule. If you're owed money and you've set, as a publisher, you can set your account, whatever threshold you want or frequency, once a month, twice a month, whenever my balance is over $1,000, whatever you want to set it at. As soon as it hits it and the funds are there from the advertiser, it goes out. If the advertiser's late, the second we fund their account, it processes those funds into your account. So
this is a good one. I mean, we have publishers in the room. Does anyone have a question or a contention or something that they want to? I can throw you the box around this because front row. You want to catch it so we can have you on the mic? You just speak into it.
Okay, I'm relatively new to the affiliate game myself. I started my business at home. And I have to say that I'm very pleased with the industry coming out of 25 years of healthcare. So my question is, what are the regulations from the Federal Trade Commission that publishers are going to have to deal with that's going to impact our revenue? And is the federal, you guys is dealing with the Federal Trade Commission, would that impact us, you guys? If there was something that you guys had to deal with, that would that impact the way we do business with you?
You mean around disclosures and things like that? Or?
Or GDPR
what is the government looking at as far as publishers? I mean, what in the next 5 years is going to be the regulations for us in content? Like the fake news stuff. Everybody talk about the fake news, but nobody even call people who put fake news out. Nobody calls them on it. They continue to do it. If I wanted to put something up about one of you guys, fake news, what would stop that? What type of federal laws are going to be put in place to keep that from happening?
Well, FTC requires you to disclose that you're earning money from your links, that you may be earning money for referring sales. If you're promoting fake news, I think that's more of a brand decision or maybe a network decision on their policy of what they accept. I mean, we even have criteria that in our marketplace environment, you have to, you can't do certain things that maybe a brand would work with you direct through. So I think there's no simple answer there, but the big picture is the disclosures by the FTC because they're going to come after you. And
I'm also going to chuck in a very basic capitalist viewpoint. Anything that affects you guys as publishers or advertisers affects us as networks or intermediaries. And therefore, we are aligned. We want to identify activity. We want to put controls in place. We want to make sure that it doesn't happen. And that's only something that we can do when these things surface. So we've obviously seen with the Nexus tax situation over a number of years, it was the big topic. It now seems to have kind of settled down a bit. But we obviously now have some new Californian law that's going to be coming out, and all of these things are going to have everybody kind of focused. But if we were to allow politicians to make the choices, the internet wouldn't work. So it's just a question of actually matching what they are trying to do with the reality of what it is that can be done. I mean, ultimately, from us as a global network, GDPR, yes, it's a pain. But ultimately, from the affiliate channel, we are relatively data light. We should be embracing this. This is an opportunity to highlight all of those bad actors in the digital marketplace and basically call them out. Have them removed. At the same point, we also want to make sure that our house is in order. So this is no bad thing.
This could have been the whole panel, right? GDPR, privacy. Yeah. So I asked for this panel to be an hour and a half. We're down to the last few minutes. But there is a PMA roundtable at like an hour, and they're going to discuss GDPR and tracking and some of that stuff. So you might, if you're interested in that, I would suggest going there.
Yeah, and what I'll also just say to you is that our responsibility to you is to educate on GDPR, California privacy law. It doesn't even have to be public policy related. It could be Apple ITP. And those are webinars that we have floating around out there should you want to be a part of those, whether live or to watch them.
So let me ask this one because it encompasses a bunch of things on here, particularly if you want to address the cookieless tracking. But what are you excited about on your roadmap this year that people in the room should be excited about as merchants or advertisers? And as I warned you on the question list, please be very specific when people can expect that from an accountability standpoint in the future. But look, most of the R&D in the industry is going to come out of this stage. So I'd love to just give you a chance to share with what people in the room can look forward to.
I'll try to be specific. I'm not hiding anything or
you can go by quarter. It doesn't have to be by month.
No. I mean, I'll talk about like basically kind of the here and now. I think the thing that I'm excited about is how the pieces are coming together to drive like the whole. So in other words, we think about the business in terms of or marketing to consumers from an insights perspective, in terms of how you market to the consumer, and the kind of the commissioning and how that whole works together. So the work that we've been doing for now a number of years and continue to improve in terms of understanding performance relative to the other marketing channels, stuff that we have done or doing on customer journey, the incrementality I'm super excited about. So all the stuff on the data that helps define how you can run a smarter program, a smarter growth program, more incremental program. In terms of marketing consumers, we launched in September our ability to do personalization, right? We're able to, at scale, do new versus repeat or look at thresholds of loyalty, geo-targeting, cross-category affinities and things like that. So that's early days, even though it's not early days, I think, in the marketplace. And then I would say that the things that we're doing on the commissioning side, creating more and more flexibility, beyond just the sale. And we've had that for a while, but we continue to improve on it. Pulling that all together allows you to do some things like, to take programs to the next level. So I'm excited about how it's like kind of all come together at this point.
Great.
We hit like a critical mass.
Mark?
So we're in the final stages of integrating with in-app tracking providers. So obviously, Button, super cool tool. Adjust, AppFiler. Man, there's a whole host of SDKs. When it's out, which is imminent, it's going to be something that we want all of the advertisers to embrace, because obviously, if publishers are driving traffic to apps, then obviously you want to be able to monitor that in-app activity and be rewarded on that basis too. But that couples also, I talked about the advertiser master tag, we also have a publisher master tag. And that tool is, again, just about to go into beta, and it's going to allow a number of interesting solutions to make it seamless for any publisher through the Awin UI to basically flick a switch and engage with that solution. I can't give too much away, but things like image recognition for price and product, and in some instances, a universal basket. So your traffic can actually complete the transaction without leaving your site.
Very cool.
Great. So it's a continuation of something we've been talking about in market for a little while now, but what I'm most excited about coming into the first 2 quarters, I'm going to use 2 quarters if that's okay, because there are distinctly things coming out during 2 quarters with regard to what we're calling programmatic affiliate. And just to level set on what that means to us, it's really just about automation, data usage, and injecting AI and machine learning into everything that we do. And a couple of the more exciting, there's a lot of things on the product roadmap that pertain to this in the first couple of quarters, but some of the most exciting things to me are on the advertiser side, really heightened DMP type capabilities, right? The ability for them to ingest their CRM data. Rakuten Marketing is a huge company, Rakuten even larger, touching 1 billion consumers. So how do we become kind of that off-the-shelf segmentation knowledge base to help them understand who are real coupon propensity shoppers, who are real shoppers versus looky-loos, and a host of other segmentation strategies that they can apply to their own CRM knowledge and database, and then make those actionable, understand those consumers such that they can set dynamic commissioning and other incentive programs that will then in turn, through a publisher tag, be able to be highlighted through automated recommendation engine in the publisher UI. So really about matchmaking at a higher level using AI and machine learning in a way that we've never done before.
Great.
So mobile obviously is becoming a big thing, and media partners, publishers want to get paid, and they're engaging even people from app to app or from web to app. And when those apps open, one of the big challenges is trying to get to the exact product. So we're creating deep linking capabilities into apps. That's one thing. Also deferred deep linking. So if you click and you're prompted to download an app that you don't have on your phone, after you download that app, it will still open to the specific page that the brand wanted it to go to, and then complementing that, the ability to do A/B testing within that, so you can send them some portion of your traffic to maybe the beginning of why they should submit a form, or get them right into the form, things like that. And then we also have this, it's kind of part of the same product, but the ability to power what we call a loyalty interstitial. There's a lot of companies out there that want to offer loyalty, but they don't have an infrastructure and they're not working with a third party. So this creates a branded third-party interstitial that can capture some information that will identify the customer back to the publisher, like a bank, and then the transaction can happen as normally, and it can enable more new types of partnerships. For social, it's really becoming big. One of the challenges is a lot of social marketers, influencers aren't used to affiliate networks. They don't want to go through the sign up, so we'll have single sign on, single sign up through social networks like Twitter, Facebook, Instagram. They can just click, they create an account. Once they're approved, they can provide more information later. And then we'll be able to ingest the social media data, so when an advertiser is thinking of working with a partner, and they have a YouTube page and an Instagram page and Twitter, they can get more social stats around that to understand the potential and reach. And then lastly, kind of more on the idea of brands that are migrating over to Impact, we want to make that easier. We have a stat tag now that a publisher can put on their site, and if they go and get one of their partners, one of their advertisers' links, and just put it in their site, it'll automatically convert that direct link into a trackable link. And then we'll also enable in a migration event to take the legacy links that often never get converted to the new tracking links. It'll convert those automatically to tracking links. And then something else brands really want is when you move from one network or platform to another, you lose a lot of continuity in data. So we have a new feature that will historically ingest that data, so that after they're working on our platform, they can do more year over year. This is all coming out, March, June, March, in the order of everything I described. So.
All right, well, everyone here, you can hold them accountable. I want to thank the panel for your great insights, and I'm sure that actually people hang around for a few minutes on the side if you have individual questions. Also have free copies of Performance Partnership book at the back, so please take one or two on the way out, and thank you all for coming.